How do you make a business case to leadership to invest in parental leave, both from a policy perspective, and you convince leadership to bring in Parentaly and to pay money for a service that sometimes leaders will say, like, do we really need that? How did you make the business case for those two things?
I very strongly leaned in on, if we don't do this, this is what will happen. These people will leave. And another thing, at the same time, we were working on diversity and inclusion. And so I put it all together, which I think that diversity needs to be a part of it needs to be woven into everything. And so when I was making the argument to implement these new things, that was what I said, is that if we do not have this, then we're going to lose. And I was particularly talking about working mothers. And I was like, we are going to lose these people. And that will then impact, our future leaders. Like, how are we growing people from within and all of these things? And so if we don't do it, this is what's going to happen.
Hi, Jessica. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, I'm so excited to talk to you.
We have a lot to cover because we've known each other for a while. You actually brought Parentaly into your last organization before you were a mother. So before you had parental leave, you realized that there was a challenge with parental leave. I want to get to your parental leave experience in a minute. But I wanted to start this off by saying you come in, you're leading the people function at a 200-person company, and you and I connected, and right away you had a lot of questions and a lot of thoughts. Bring me back to that moment in time. How did you think about parental leave from the perspective of an HR leader running the people function in that moment?
Yeah, I instantly knew from past experience, and mind you, I've been in HR for almost 13 years, is that I've seen people leave a company that were amazing because we did not set them up correctly to come back, or we did not make them feel welcomed back. And so I instantly knew when I heard about the company, I thought, oh, this is amazing. Like, you're coaching people, you're giving people resources, and not just them, but their managers, because I have absolutely seen where managers did not know what to do about parental leave, and they treated it as like something that they were just not meant to deal with. Like, this is HR's problem. You go talk to HR, you're pregnant, good luck, go talk to HR, congratulations. And it's like, why? Why can't it be interactive? And so when I started with that organization, I knew, because also the demographics. So we were an early stage startup. Most of our employees were between the ages of 25 to 35. That's like prime years for most people that are thinking about family planning. And so I knew, and even when I joined, I think we already had like 3 people that were pregnant. And so I'm like, okay, this is something we need to address, especially because we don't have a lot of coverage. So it's not like we had people that could just cover people when they went out on leave. And so I knew it was important because we wanted people that were leaving to come back. And so I always thought about it, like, how can we make sure that they come back and they feel welcomed? And so that was really, really important. I will say that it was a great decision. I'd do it again. I plan to do it again, any company I go to. So yeah.
How do you make a business case to leadership to invest in parental leave, both from a policy perspective? You extended the policy, which many company leaders will say, oh gosh, we can't afford that. You were able to do it on the policy side, and you convinced leadership to bring in Parentaly and to pay money for a service that sometimes leaders will say, like, do we really need that? How did you make the business case for those two things?
Yeah, I very strongly leaned in on, if we don't do this, this is what will happen. These people will leave. And another thing, at the same time, we were working on diversity and inclusion. And so I put it all together, which I think that diversity needs to be a part of it needs to be woven into everything. And so when I was making the argument to implement these new things, that was what I said, is that if we do not have this, then we're going to lose. And I was particularly talking about working mothers. And I was like, we are going to lose these people. And that will then impact, our future leaders. Like, how are we growing people from within and all of these things? I can't lie and say there was not resistance, because there absolutely was. There was resistance to say, we cannot afford this. We are a small startup. And my pushback is we cannot afford not to do it, because how much does it cost to replace these these said people. And so if we don't do it, this is what's going to happen. And it took persistence. I am nothing if not persistent. If you tell me no, I'm coming back. And I'm going to ask, well, like, why this time? And then I'm going to come back with more data. And so it definitely took several conversations to get this in place. It was not easy. And so I want the listener to know that it wasn't just like I asked and I received. That was not the case. I had to keep coming back with more data, and I am a big person on research. So I kept researching, like, what are other startups doing? So another thing with business leaders is they want to know what their competitors are doing. I'm like, well, our competitors are actually offering more time. And so, like, if we can't get to what they're offering, what's the in between? And so one of the things that I think was a win, and I've learned this in HR, is like, even if you don't get everything you want, did you get something? So I didn't get all the time that I wanted to give, but I got an extra 2 weeks. I didn't get, some things, but I got something. So, and I'm going to keep building on that. So start from somewhere. That's what I would say. Start from somewhere.
I thought you did a really great job. Back when we first met, you were really transparent about, here's where we want to get, but it's going to take me some time, and I'm going to pick away at this.
Yes.
And so, and I feel the same way. I also run a small business, and we would love to offer so much more across so many different benefits. And I found that it can be helpful to talk about that and to say, that's where we want to get to. And here's how we're going to get there step by step. And it was so cool for me to watch you do that, because you actually did then get there piece by piece, building towards something that is much better. And I think you're right that a lot of people, they're scared and paralyzed. Like, if I can't get it all, it just seems like this huge mountain to climb.
Yeah. It's like an all or nothing mentality. And I'm like, absolutely not. I'm going to get something out of this. I was like, even if I just get a week, and then next quarter, I'm going to come back and get more time, so just be persistent. Yeah.
So then you became pregnant.
I did,
you rolled this out actually quite a while before you would need the parental leave policy or the Parentaly benefit. You also happen to be a career coach yourself. And so I was really excited when you were pregnant for all of the obvious reasons, but also because I was like, wow, this is going to be interesting to hear her perspective as a career coach going through a career coaching experience with parental leave.
Yeah.
What was that like for you?
Oh my goodness. A whole new world, like Jasmine. And I mean that in an awesome way, because you're right. Like, I'm a leader, I'm a coach, but I was in, deep waters of the unknown. Like, you think that you're ready. And obviously the family planning was something that was on my mind, but it was something that, like, once I got pregnant, and full disclosure, I had twins, and I'm a Black woman. So there were just so many complications and so many fears that I was very transparent about. Like, I am in a road unknown and I am very scared. And I was very transparent with my leadership team about it. Even, it's funny because I have absolutely coached people on, like, when to tell their employer that they're expecting and, like, how to go about it. And even when I had to do it and I knew my leader would be excited for me, I was still nervous. Like, I was still like, oh my goodness, like, what do I say? And, like, how do I say it? And, like, am I going to feel differently? And, there were a lot of emotions. And I think me being in the thick of it, after I have coached people, I'm like, I've coached people from the perspective of HR, not from the perspective of I am also a mother. So it was very, very different for me. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't expect to feel all the emotions that I felt. I thought, like, I know this, like, this is how you do it. Step 1, 2, 3. But then when you have to do it, it doesn't feel that way.
What were your fears in that moment? Explain more why you felt that sort of fear, anxiety.
I think for me, the fear I felt was that I had coached women that were more junior in their career. And at the time, I was a senior vice president, and I didn't know any other senior vice presidents that were, like, in my position. And I had recently been promoted. So that was another thing. Like, I had recently gone from a VP to a senior vice president and gotten more responsibilities. And I thought, like, oh, I don't want this to quote unquote get in the way, or I don't want them to feel like I'm not as committed as I was, 2 weeks ago when they didn't know that I was pregnant and I, wasn't saying anything. So I think it was the fear of, like, I want to remain to be a good leader and be seen as a good leader, and that I'm going to take this time for myself and for my family, but I'm still committed. I think it was the factor of, am I still committed, which I absolutely was. But I was scared that they would feel differently about it.
I totally resonate with that feeling, because I felt the same way. Like even with our investors, I had two of my children after I started Parentally, and I knew they would be happy. I knew they knew what they were signing up for when they invested with us. And still, I felt like I had to approach that conversation, even though we coach people not to feel this way,
Yes.
that I had to justify and I had to like share, overly verbalize my continued commitment to the business. And I could almost feel myself coming out of my body in that moment, being like, what are you doing? You know, like you're coming in with this lack of confidence when this is the business model that I run, you know? And so I totally hear you that there's something about it that just sort of stirs up these emotions that
you can coach people all day, but when you have to do it for yourself, you have to like find this power from within. And I had, even, this is funny, I'm a really big sticky note person. I had put a sticky note like when I was like about to tell my leader, mind you, I absolutely adore her and love her and knew she was going to be happy for me. But in the moment, I literally wrote on a sticky note, like, this is positive. This is something you've always wanted, to remind myself that like, even though I'm scared, like I wanted this family, I wanted these daughters, I want this. And these people are going to support me. But in the moment, I was absolutely afraid.
Oh, I hear you. So then you started the Parentally program. Tell me what that experience was like and what surprised you about doing that work through Parentally.
I think what surprised me was very much all of the templates and like all the things that I just had not thought of. Like in my mind, even though I, have done this for other people, I thought, oh, I'm a leader. I'm just going to write down everything I do and somebody's going to do it. Well, no, that's not how it works. And mind you, I only have one person on my team. So I was very much concerned. I think that's my main thing. I was very concerned for her of like, what is she going to have to take on while I'm not here? Not thinking of like, there's some stuff that we could just pause. Like she doesn't have to do everything I'm doing on top of her work. And so when I joined, I really did try to come into it from the mind frame of, I am not an expert in this. Like I am a leader in HR, I'm a leader in coaching, but this is outside of my realm. So I'm going to come into this with very open mind, open heart of like, teach me, help me, guide me. And so my energy from the very start was like, don't think of me as the leader in this, like treat me like everybody else because I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Your Parentally coach was very nervous because she said, oh my gosh, Jessica's this force of nature. She's so wonderful. She is a career coach. It's very intimidating when you are a career coach coaching another career coach. Yeah. But then she said, at least her feedback to us was, it was wonderful, and you could almost make the case that someone who understands coaching almost gets even more out of a coaching experience. Like they understand how this is supposed to work. How did going through that pre-leave period impact your thoughts from an HR perspective? Or did it not?
It absolutely did. It really enforced to me the prep work that's needed. And I will give insight that my daughters were premature. So I was not ready like I should have been, if I'm being honest. Like I absolutely think my coach did everything she could to get me ready. But I think mentally, I was one of those people that was like manifesting that like, no, they're going to come on this date. Like I didn't even have a hospital bag. Like that's how much I refused to prep. I was like, no, I'm not doing this. This is what's going to happen. I'm going to will myself into my due date. Well, it didn't quite happen like that. I went to the hospital with nothing. But the prep work was so important, especially when it came to like getting my manager ready. So getting my manager ready and then also getting my employee ready to take over my work. So I think that was the added layer for me. Like if you're a leader, making sure your leadership team is ready and then making sure that your actual department, your actual team is ready. And I was very focused on my department being ready, not necessarily the leadership team, which I absolutely had to put more work into, particularly with my peers. So like thinking about like, how is my leave going to impact like my CFO? How is it going to impact everyone else? Because when I went on leave was, the time that we were doing performance reviews, we were doing employee engagement, we were doing all these things that were annual that we needed to be ready for. So I was just not prepared for thinking about it both ways, thinking about employees and your leadership team.
Looking back, what is one thing you did really well before you went on leave and one thing you wish you would have done more of?
My coach, we documented like all the templates. I absolutely utilized them. We wrote everything down. Everything was in writing. The time frames were ready. When I text my team and said like, hey, I'm on the way to the hospital, they were like, got it. Good. We have all the documents. Like we had folders. We had everything that we needed in that sense. I actually think when I think about preparing myself, I wish I would have like took more time to think it through for myself. Like I was so worried about getting everybody else ready that I don't think I actually sat down and got myself ready, if I'm being really transparent.
Yeah. I've thought a lot about that of like, I worked up until with my second and third child, I had induction dates. Mm-hmm. And so I did the same thing where I worked up until I went to the hospital. And I look back and I think, well, why didn't I just take like a couple days to myself to really get in the headspace? Because then you have these babies and everything is about them at that point in time.
Everything changes. But I wish I would have done that. And I actually, ironically, probably a month before I had the babies, I did take like a week off and I just like read books that whole week and it was amazing. And I was so happy that I did that. But the day that I actually like ended up having the babies, I worked that morning. I was sending out emails and then I was like, oh, you know what? My blood pressure's high. My midwife said I should go to the hospital. So I'll be back later. And they're like, wait, what?
Oh my gosh. So let's talk about the return to work experience, which must have been very difficult, especially with twins. Yes. I've never had twins. I have heard it's much harder than just having a singleton. What was that return to work experience like?
I think for me, my team was so amazing because I had set a strong boundary that I did not want to be contacted. So I, especially because my twins were premature and they were in the NICU for a while, like I really, really needed to focus on my family. So even before I left, I had said, hey, I want to have this boundary that like, do not contact me about work stuff. Like you guys are going to figure it out. I believe in you, but I have a strong boundary on this. And my team absolutely respected that. There were 2 times that actually me and my manager got together, but it was like literally just for her and I to talk. We didn't talk about work. We talked about the babies and how, I was doing with my mental health and my physical health. Like it was more of like as a friend, to talk than it was about work. And so that was really, really important to me to set that boundary. And my team respected it. And it was something that I valued. And so, that it worked out perfectly for me in that sense.
And was that pre-planned?
It was.
Catching up with your manager?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was pre-planned before I went out that, I wanted us to still be able to talk. I consider her to be like now, especially now that I've left that organization, like she is absolutely a close friend. And it was also pre-planned that like I was going to be talking to my team, not about work. So like I would send them baby photos or I would say like, hey ladies, like not sleeping or like just quirky things that were going on, but we did not talk about work.
I love that. We have heard from a lot of people that they like maintaining the social connection. And even for some folks, especially abroad, where people tend to take 6 to 12 months, that people really like being brought in on the social team outings or things like that, that doesn't bring on stress, but allows that continued connection. And so I love that you were able to plan for that. I think one of the hardest parts with parental leave is, especially with your first, is not knowing how you'll actually feel in the moment. So I'm impressed that you knew you would want that boundary.
Oh yeah. I was very, very
actually want it in the moment, right?
Yeah. And I think part of it is that I'm a recovering perfectionist and I knew that if they asked me about work or if they asked me to do something that I would do it. And so I knew for my own mental health that I had to say, I can't do anything or I'm going to do everything. And I knew that.
Yeah. So you returned to work and you returned to work in an environment where there was a lot of change going on. We hear that a lot from people who go through our coaching program, whether their manager was switched out while they are on leave or they return to an environment where there are layoffs happening or the business has totally pivoted or their project has been deprioritized or, and it can be very scary and sort of disorienting What was that experience like for you to walk back into a scenario that felt very different from what you left?
So another thing that my coach was amazing at was talking about like the re-onboarding. So one of the things that my team did, and I think this is amazing because obviously I work in HR, was my direct report did a re-onboarding plan for me. So there was like a phased in approach. Like I was not coming back. I came back, quote unquote, part-time, whereas I wasn't going to every meeting, but I was still like logged in. She did we have like a new hire spotlight. She did like a rehire spotlight where she like spotlighted me and like we talked about the babies and all that. And we sent it out to the whole company. I was reintroduced to meetings knowing that like I was just going to be there to listen and I wasn't going to have to like, basically participate, just to listen and like get caught up. So that part of it was absolutely amazing. But I can say the week before I was going to come back, I was riddled with anxiety. Mind you, knowing that like my situation, I have a nanny. I want to be honest about that. Like she's in my house with me and I was still, and my twins are upstairs. I'm downstairs. I could go up, at any time. And I was still had so much anxiety. I think the first day I logged in, I had a meeting for 30 minutes and then I logged off and started crying. Like I was just so filled with emotion. And I think my team was so kind to me. And even out of all the things that they did, they gave me space. That's one thing that I would say. And most of the people on my team were mothers already. And so they knew and they were checking in with me throughout the day. Like, how are you feeling? What's going on? So they gave me space that first 2 weeks to where I did not feel pressure to be, quote unquote, back on. I did not feel pressure to be back being like a strong leader. I was very much in a soft girl era.
Yeah. That's so important. And it's just even when things are exactly as planned and you know what you're coming back into, it is such an emotional experience. And you're right. You are in a very good position where you have a nanny and the babies are right there. And even still, it's so hard, the context switching to go from this lifestyle of you're doing something totally different. And now all of a sudden you sort of flip that switch back on. Yeah. What, in hindsight, like if you were to start a new role today as chief people officer somewhere else, what would you do differently? Or what are the things that you would be investigating to make sure that that company is set up successfully to support new parents?
I think the first thing I would do is I would contact everybody that's gone on leave and I would want to do like a think section or like, tell me what it was like when you came back. Were you welcomed back? Did anyone acknowledge that you were even back? You know what I mean? Like, were you thrown back in and had expectations set for you? I think it's really, really important within that first couple of weeks that they are not expected to, quote unquote, be back full time. And whatever that means to that person, whether that's meetings, whether that's if they're client facing, are they expected to be back and like presenting the clients on day 2? Like, what does that actually look like? Right. So I think even setting them up that first 30 days is so, so important.
I think that's so incredibly helpful. I want to jump into hot topics. So we started doing this recently and we love it. This is not a gotcha, so don't sweat. So I'm going to go through a few hot takes. I'll throw something out at you, answer in like a couple sentences, and we'll get through a bunch of these. Okay. So, ready?
Yep, let's do it.
Okay. Best benefit you've ever received as an employee?
Ooh. This is a hard one. Like, there's so many good ones. I definitely think the leave. So parental leave. So making sure that I had enough time to spend with my twins. And actually another thing that I will point out is that my twins were in the NICU for 2 weeks and they gave me that time back. So they allowed me to have those extra 2 weeks back once the babies got home with me.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What is the right amount of parental leave an employer should offer?
This is a hot one. I was actually ready to go back. So I will say that I was off for 4 months and at 4 months I was ready to go back. So it is very personal. I know some people that would not have been the case, but for me, I was ready. I was ready, even though it was emotional, I was ready. So can I say, I don't believe that there should be a standardized, I don't believe that they're like, you know what I mean? Yeah.
No, I hear you. It's not a real question. It's like kind of an impossible one. What's the one misconception about the HR profession you wish you could change?
I think this is a funny one, and I posted about this one on LinkedIn where people are like, HR is not your friend. No, finance isn't your friend either. Neither is, any other department. So I think thinking about HR as like an adversary or like they're an extension of legal. I tell people all the time, I'm not a lawyer. I'm married to a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer and I don't want to be. So just that perception of being the gatekeeper, I think, HR can be creative. I think of HR as an ability to be creative. Even utilizing this type of service is a step in being creative in how you think about your employees.
Best and worst advice you received before or after your twins arrived?
Oh my goodness. People love to give me twin advice when they had never had twins. So that was really fun about like what I should do with them and all this fun stuff. And I'm like, but you don't know, this is an interesting one. I think the best advice, and this was actually recent advice, was to put them in the same crib together now that they're 6 months. And it has been a game changer for us. And like they comfort each other. It is amazing and like the sweetest thing to watch. I like cry watching them sometimes. But yeah, we put them now, they're in the same crib together and it is amazing. They sleep much better.
What was the worst advice? Or are you not able to share? Probably the worst advice is anything you heard from non-twin parents, right?
Exactly.
That is so funny. I cannot imagine giving advice to someone, given that I have not had twins, on that. Okay. Last hot take. Number one thing you've learned about yourself since becoming a mother?
Oh, this one makes me emotional. I've learned that I'm resilient, that no matter what, I'll figure it out. It's not going to be perfect, but I'll figure it out.
Oh, I love it. All right. That is all we have. But before we go, we are going to share a link to your book and we will point folks towards where they can find you on LinkedIn. We love all of your posts. You have so many good perspectives. Are you also career coaching? If people are looking for a career coach, is that still?
Oh, yeah. I absolutely am. Right. I'm taking on some new clients. I'm doing resume writing too. So absolutely reach out.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your experience here and congratulations on the babies. I know they're 6 months old, but they still count as a baby. And thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much. I really had a great time talking to you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The False Tradeoff. Make sure to subscribe if you like what you heard and give us a follow on LinkedIn to continue the conversation on all things working parenthood and parental leave. Is there a topic you'd love us to cover in a future episode? Drop us an email at hello@parentaly.com. And if you're looking for support on preparing for parental leave, head over to www.parentaly.com. We have checklists, guides, and other free resources to help you make the experience a little bit easier. That's PARENTALY.com.